Welcome, dear viewers, to a heartwarming tale of unexpected kindness, second chances, and the mysterious ways in which fate can bring people together. Enjoy the story. Sarah Collins sighed heavily as she ended yet another fruitless phone call. Finding a live-in caregiver position was proving to be impossible. Every potential employer lost interest the moment they heard she had a child. "I'm sorry, you're not suitable for our needs. Goodbye," they'd say, hanging up before she could even explain her qualifications. Sarah ran her fingers through her short brown hair, frustration etched on her face. Her nursing degree and years of experience as an OR nurse seemed worthless in the face of single motherhood. But she needed a job with accommodation desperately. After their small town was devastated by flooding, she and her daughter Emily had been forced to move in with relatives in another state. They'd been bouncing from one relative's house to another, currently squeezed into her aunt's tiny 400-square-foot apartment, along with 4 other people. "Just one more call," Sarah muttered to herself, dialing the last number on her list. Her heart raced as a pleasant female voice answered. "Hello, Collins residence." "Hi, I'm calling about the caregiver position," Sarah said, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "Oh yes, we're looking for someone to care for my elderly father. Do you have experience with bedridden patients?" "Yes, I do. I'm actually a registered nurse with several years of experience." "That's wonderful. When can you start?" Sarah's heart leaped. "I could start immediately, but I should mention that I have a young daughter." There was a pause, and Sarah held her breath, waiting for the usual rejection. Instead, the woman said, "That's not a problem at all. You'll be living in the guest house, so your daughter won't disturb anyone. Can you move in tomorrow?" Sarah could hardly believe her ears. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mrs. Collins." As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, a chance to start over. The next morning, Sarah and Emily stood in front of a charming guest house on the grounds of a sprawling country estate. The main house loomed in the distance, its brick facade gleaming in the morning sun. "Wow, Mommy, it's like a castle," Emily exclaimed, her blue eyes wide with wonder. Sarah smiled, ruffling her daughter's blonde curls. "It's pretty impressive, isn't it? This is going to be our new home for a while." As they settled into the guest house, Sarah marveled at how spacious and well-appointed it was. There was a small kitchen, a cozy living room, and 2 bedrooms, all furnished comfortably. After lunch, prepared by the estate's kind-hearted cook, Martha, Sarah left Emily coloring in the living room and went to meet her new patient. She knocked gently on the bedroom door of the main house. "Come in," a gruff voice called. Sarah entered to find an elderly man propped up in bed, staring out the window with a resigned expression. He turned to look at her, his blue eyes sharp despite his frail appearance. "You must be the new nurse," he said. "I'm Alexander Collins." Sarah smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Collins. I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you." Alexander nodded, then asked abruptly, "My daughter mentioned you have a child. Where is she?" "She's in the guest house, sir. Would you like to meet her?" To Sarah's surprise, Alexander's face lit up. "Yes, please, bring her in." When Emily entered the room, she approached Alexander's bed without hesitation. "Hi, Grandpa, do your legs hurt?" Alexander chuckled, a sound that seemed to surprise even him. "No, sweetheart, I wish they did. I can't feel my legs at all, that's the problem." As Emily chatted away with Alexander, Sarah watched in amazement. She had never seen a child take to a stranger so quickly, nor had she expected her gruff patient to be so charming with a child. Later, as Sarah was helping Alexander with his exercises, he said, "You know, I've had many caregivers over the past 2 years. They all start out well, but they either leave on their own or I send them away. Some people just don't have the right touch, you know. They do their job, but there's no warmth, no soul. I can feel it in my bones when someone's like that." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I'll do my best to provide not just care, but companionship, Mr. Collins." Alexander smiled. "Call me Alex, and I have a feeling you and Emily are going to fit in just fine here." As the weeks passed, Sarah and Emily settled into a comfortable routine at the Collins estate. Sarah spent her days caring for Alex, while Emily explored the vast grounds and made friends with the staff. One evening, as Sarah was bringing Alex his dinner, he called her over with a mischievous glint in his eye. "Sarah, dear, could you do me a favor? Behind that bookshelf there's a hidden panel. Press the switch, would you?" Intrigued, Sarah did as he asked. To her amazement, the bookshelf slid away to reveal a fully stocked bar. Alex grinned. "Pour us a little cognac, would you? Just a touch." Sarah hesitated. "Alex, you know alcohol isn't recommended with your medication." "Oh, come now," Alex chuckled. "I was a cardiologist for 40 years before I started my medical equipment business. A small amount won't hurt. It'll be our little secret." Against her better judgment, Sarah poured 2 small glasses. As they sipped the amber liquid, Alex's expression grew wistful. "You know, Sarah, I never got to be a grandfather. Married late, had my kids late. Now they're both pushing 40 and neither seems interested in settling down. I always dreamed of spoiling grandkids, you know. Children are like angels on earth. When they're around, the whole world seems brighter." Sarah listened, touched by the longing in Alex's voice. She thought of Emily, who had taken to visiting Alex every evening for bedtime stories. "Emily adores you, Alex. You've become like a grandfather to her." Alex's eyes misted over. "She's a wonderful child. You've done an amazing job raising her on your own." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but she's worth every struggle." As they continued to talk, Sarah found herself opening up about the flood that had destroyed their home, the challenges of being a single mother, and her dreams for the future. Alex listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and support. By the time Sarah left Alex's room that night, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the cognac. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she and Emily had found a place where they truly belonged. One sunny afternoon, Alex asked Sarah to take him to the guest house in his wheelchair. As they approached the small building, Sarah noticed there were no steps at the entrance, just a gently sloping ramp. "Did you have this built recently?" she asked, curious. Alex nodded, a sad smile on his face. "This guest house was actually built for me. A few years ago, my children were arguing so violently that I couldn't stand it anymore. I told them to either put me in a nursing home or build me a separate place to live. They chose the latter." Sarah's heart ached for the lonely old man. "I'm so sorry, Alex. Family conflicts can be so painful." Alex patted her hand. "Don't be sorry, my dear. Their fighting has lessened since then, and now this lovely little house is providing a home for you and Emily. Everything happens for a reason." As they toured the guest house, Alex asked Sarah about her living situation before coming to work for him. Sarah told him about the flood, the inadequate government compensation, and the cramped living conditions with relatives. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. That evening, he asked Sarah to stay after Emily's bedtime story. "Sarah, I've grown very fond of you and Emily," he began, his voice serious. "I know my time is limited, despite what the doctors say. I've been thinking about what will happen to you two when I'm gone." Sarah started to protest, but Alex held up a hand to stop her. "Please, let me finish. I've decided to leave this guest house to you and Emily in my will. It's the least I can do to ensure you have a stable home." Sarah gasped, tears springing to her eyes. "Alex, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but are you sure? What about your children?" Alex chuckled. "Oh, they'll be well taken care of, don't you worry. This is just a small part of my estate, and it's mine to give as I please. I want to do this for you and Emily. You've brought so much joy into my life these past months." Overwhelmed with emotion, Sarah could only nod her thanks as tears streamed down her face. As summer turned to fall, Alex's health began to decline rapidly. He refused many of his medications and most of his meals, insisting that he wanted to die with dignity. Sarah did her best to keep him comfortable, but it was clear that Alex was slipping away. Emily, sensing the change, spent even more time by Alex's bedside, regaling him with stories from her imagination when he was too weak to tell his own. One chilly February morning, Sarah entered Alex's room to find him unusually still. With a heavy heart, she realized he had passed away in his sleep. As she and Emily mourned the loss of their dear friend, Alex's children, Nathan and Lisa, arrived to make funeral arrangements. Sarah was surprised by their businesslike approach to their father's death, but she reminded herself that grief affects everyone differently. The day after the funeral, Sarah approached Lisa about her final paycheck and to discuss when she and Emily should move out. To her surprise, Lisa insisted they stay until spring or until Sarah found new employment. "Dad was very fond of you both," Lisa said, her voice softer than Sarah had ever heard it. "He'd want you to have time to get back on your feet." Grateful for the reprieve, Sarah began to make plans for their future. She was eager to see the house Alex had left them in his will, but she wanted to wait until the ground thawed before making the trip. As soon as the spring weather allowed, Sarah took a train to the small town of Oakville, where the house Alex had left them was located. She left Emily with Lisa, promising to return soon with news of their new home. The train stopped at a small platform surrounded by dense forest. Sarah breathed in the crisp, pine-scented air as she followed a sign pointing to the town. Oakville turned out to be a charming community nestled among rolling hills. Sarah easily found the address Alex had given her, a large two-family house on the outskirts of town. "Some little cottage," Sarah muttered to herself, taking in the impressive structure. She found the hidden key where Alex had described and let herself in. The interior was comfortably furnished, with a fully equipped kitchen, a cozy living room, and 2 spacious bedrooms. Everything was ready for immediate occupancy. Excited by the prospect of finally having a real home for herself and Emily, Sarah decided to introduce herself to the neighbors. She walked around to the other side of the house and called out, "Hello, anyone home?" She heard movement inside, and then a deep, familiar voice called back, "Who's there?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be. A tall, broad-shouldered man came around the corner, and Sarah found herself face to face with none other than Robert Shields, Emily's father. "Sarah?" Robert gasped, his green eyes wide with shock. "What on earth are you doing here?" Sarah was too stunned to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed to stammer, I inherited this half of the house, from Alexander Collins. What are you doing here?" Robert ran a hand through his dark hair, looking equally bewildered. "Alex Collins was my father. He gave me this half of the house years ago." Sarah felt like the ground was spinning beneath her feet. "Your father? But how? Why didn't you ever mention this?" Robert sighed heavily. "It's a long story. Why don't you come inside? I think we have a lot to talk about." Sarah followed Robert into his side of the house, her mind reeling. As they sat at his kitchen table, Robert began to explain. "Alex was my biological father, but he wasn't married to my mother. He used to visit us when I was a kid, always trying to make amends with my mom, but she was too proud to accept his help or forgiveness. I don't know the whole story of what happened between them." Sarah listened, fascinated by this glimpse into Robert's past. "So when did he give you this house?" Robert's expression turned sheepish. "A few years ago, when we were still working together at the hospital. He called me out of the blue and said he'd bought this place, and half of it was mine. He said if I got married and gave him grandchildren, he'd sign over the whole property to me. I guess it was his way of trying to motivate me to settle down." Sarah couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, Robert, always the commitment phobe, weren't you?" Robert had the grace to look embarrassed. I know, I was an idiot, leaving you, leaving the hospital. I thought I wanted to pursue research, make a name for myself. But once I got out here, got settled in the local hospital, started my beekeeping hobby, I don't know. Life just sort of took over. This place, it's like paradise. The air, the smells, the birdsong in the morning. I've never felt so at peace anywhere else." Sarah nodded, understanding the appeal. Then a thought struck her. "Robert, did you know? About Emily?" Robert's face fell. Yes. Someone from the hospital told me you were pregnant after I left. But by then, I was so caught up in my new life, I couldn't imagine going back to diapers and midnight feedings. I know it's no excuse. I was a coward, and I'm so sorry, Sarah." Sarah felt a mix of anger and relief wash over her, At least he hadn't been completely in the dark. Well, your daughter is 7 now, and she's amazing. Smart, kind, full of energy. She's been asking about her dad lately. Robert's eyes lit up. Really? Do you think I could meet her? Sarah studied him for a long moment. Despite everything, she could see the genuine regret and longing in his eyes. Yes, I think that could be arranged. But Robert, if you come into her life, you have to be all in. No more running away when things get tough. Robert nodded solemnly. I promise, Sarah. I want to make this right. In fact, he took a deep breath. This might sound crazy, but hear me out. We're both heirs to this house now. Emily is Alex's granddaughter. What if we gave this whole family thing a try? You, me, and Emily together? Sarah's heart raced at the suggestion. Part of her wanted to reject the idea outright, to protect herself from being hurt again. But another part, a part that had never quite given up on Robert, whispered that this might be their second chance. Let's take it slow, she said finally. We'll start with introducing you to Emily, and we'll see where it goes from there. Deal? Robert's face broke into a wide grin. Deal. 6 months later, Sarah, Robert, and Emily stood hand in hand in the garden behind their home. Friends and family, including Alex's other children, gathered around them as a justice of the peace pronounced Sarah and Robert husband and wife. As they shared their first kiss as a married couple, Sarah marveled at the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment. From the desperation of homelessness to the unexpected inheritance, from years of separation to a reunion orchestrated by a man they had both come to love as a father. Emily, resplendent in a flower girl dress, beamed up at her parents. Does this mean we're a real family now? She asked. Robert scooped her up into his arms. We've always been a real family, sweetheart. It just took us a while to find our way back to each other. As the reception began, Sarah caught sight of a photo of Alex on a nearby table. She could almost hear his hearty laugh, could almost see the twinkle in his eye as he watched his family finally come together. Thank you, she whispered to the photo, for everything. And as the summer breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the sweet scent of Robert's beehives, Sarah knew that they had found not just a home, but a place where they truly belonged, together.